Welcome, everyone. This is my second take because I just needed to remember to unmute myself. So anyways, bear with us today. We are not experts in technology or figuring out all this stuff, but we're hoping to have a great hour with you and hopefully you can learn some stuff. But I'm Sheila Ebrecht. I work at Huber Ridge and McVeigh Elementary. I'm also part of our district's crisis team. I'm a mental health specialist, and we are excited that you're here with us today.
Good morning. My name is Amy Van Sickle, and I am the school counselor at Huber Ridge Elementary School, and I have been for the last 5 years. Before that, I had a few years at Walnut Springs Middle School, so I was able to bring some of that middle school experience into the elementary school. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you have a really great experience while we talk about managing stress. We hope that we have some really good information for you guys and some really good takeaways. And I was joking earlier with the crew here that bear with us because we spend probably 75% of our time talking to kids in kindergarten through 5th grade and maybe 25% talking with parents. So if things sound a little elementary sometimes, maybe that's why. Thank you for coming today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jen Verdina, and I am a school counselor at McVeigh Elementary. This is my 3rd year there at McVeigh, and I'm loving it every single day. I will be working with the Q&A, the chat box today. So I will be trying to filter those questions to Amy and Sheila as they roll in. So please feel free to use that if you have any questions. And I have just a few housekeeping tips to share with you this morning. So first of all, like Amy and Sheila said, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to spend the next hour or so with you guys, giving you some tips and some just some takeaways, hopefully from this morning that you will be able to share with your own families. So just a few reminders here. So we're still learning these virtual platforms. So just please be patient, and we ask for your flexibility as we are navigating this today. Remember that these sessions are all recorded, so for future use. So if for some reason you can't join this morning or you have missed it, you can always get that later, probably through your email. And then during the session, you will only be able to see the presenters, so Sheila, Amy, and myself, and then the slides. We won't be able to see anyone's faces or hear you speaking, but there is the way to send us questions in the chat. So, and here's how that feature works. So if you have a question, you will click on the Q&A feature down at the bottom of your screen, and then you will have the chance to send it with your screen name or check a box that you will see that will make your name anonymous. We just want you to know that ahead of time, because if we answer the question, it can be seen by everyone in the session. So we will do our best to answer as many of these questions as we see them come in. So without further ado, we can go ahead and begin. So Sheila.
Hello again. As Jen said, please feel free to do those questions and send them through the Q&A, and we will continue to try to answer those throughout the thing. We want this to be interactive, and we want your feedback, and we want to really meet your needs this morning. So let's get started. Managing stress. How do we help our children? We know right now in the world that we're in, our children are dealing with all kinds of stuff we never even thought of they would have to deal with. So we hope that you will be able to take away a few really good strategies, some practical things, some information about how to help your children manage that. And hopefully even for yourself or for if you have older kids. Like, as we said, this is working with kindergarten through 5th, but these are strategies that hopefully you can use with all ages and kind of tweak them. So we're going to get started. Our first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a poll. I'm going to share this with you. And the first question we're going to do is, how are you feeling about this school year? So this is your personal feeling about how school is going this year and all of the things that have come with it, with this ever-changing time. So I'm going to launch the poll. You'll have a few minutes to answer those questions. We'll give it about another 30 seconds as you continue to put in your answers. And like we said, feel free to add multiple ones because often we don't feel just one thing. We always try to tell our students that. Okay, I think we're going to end the polling right now. And let's see those results. We're going to share the results of this question. How are you feeling about this school year? So it looks like the majority of people are feeling anxious, which makes a lot of sense with everything that we're faced with, all of the back and forth with school and all of the things that's happening in our world right now. So hopefully you guys will take away some really good strategies to help with that anxiety. And confusion I see is up there too at 27%. So, and feeling overwhelmed. Yes, I think that's the biggest one at 73%. So all things I know I have felt with the school year, with my students as well as my own kids. So let's get going. Okay. So stress scale. We're going to start you off with one really good strategy that you can use that I often use with my students. And this is something you don't have to have. I have lots of different stress scales that I use, but I wanted to let you know that you don't have to have anything formal. You could just write the numbers 1 to 5. And it's really good, I know, even for myself to check in, to see how I'm doing, and then also to talk to my children or my students, kind of how they're feeling. And 1 would be feeling calm and happy, and 5 would be feeling like over the top and out of control and stressful. I think it's just a really good way to gauge kind of how we're doing, and also a really good sentence starter. You know, like if you're trying to figure out how to talk to your kids about their stress level, because often they want to be doing other things like video games or whatever they're doing, it's a really good way to kind of start that conversation. Types of stress and the impact on our children. We all know that stress is part of life. We all know that stress in our bodies really kind of signify or like kind of alert us when we're experiencing something. It's just a natural way for our body to tell us what's happening. And I mean, as you can see on the slide, a lot of kids report feeling stressed, and there's like a gap between 20% of children reporting they're worried about, and then 3% rate their stress as extreme. And I think sometimes that goes back and forth. I think sometimes we feel like our kids are really stressed and they're doing okay, or they're really stressed and we feel like everything is working out for them. So, and remember, there's lots of things in our body that signifies a stress response. Blood pressure, it affects our brain development, it affects our metabolism, heart rate, it affects kind of how we're feeling, or if we're not feeling good, if we have a headache, or stress definitely impacts our body physically in lots of different ways. It also, we also see depression and anxiety when we have too much stress in our lives and not able to manage that. Okay, I'm trying to figure out these slides. Different types of stress. There's positive stress, stress that we deal with every day. You might have even seen that in your students. A lot of our students really were ready to come back to school, but it was a little anxiety provoking, even if they were excited to see their teachers. And and that happens every year, regardless if it's COVID or not. I mean, they had some additional stress with having to wear a mask and social distance, but a little bit of stress and experiencing that also can be positive. And then tolerable stress, things that we deal with, just part of being human. I mean, with death in the family or maybe a job change. It's stress that we experience, but we can figure out coping strategies and a way to manage that. And then there's toxic stress, and that's the more chronic stress, like having cancer over periods of time, or having, like, if there's abuse in the family or other different things that we would call toxic stress. We're going to do another poll. So we had you guys rate yourself on how you're feeling this school year. Now I want you to think about your student. And if you have multiple students, again, we're going to give you multiple choices for that. Or you can just think of one. Maybe you have a kindergarten through 5th grade and you want to focus on that one. So kind of rate how we think our kids are doing. Let me get to the other one. And here we go. I'm going to launch the polling. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Got another 30 seconds. Okay, we're going to end polling. I'm so not great at like keeping time and figuring that. I always generalize when I'm talking about time. I'm going to share the results with you. It looks like, at least what I remember, and I think I'll go back to the first question. These are more over the board because we have some more happy and positive and content, as well as the anxious and confused and overwhelmed, but they're not as much as before with the other one. So let me see if I can share kind of just to compare. Those are the results when you guys answered how you were feeling about school as compared to your students. Yeah, seems like it's all over the board. And please feel free to continue to put questions in the Q&A so we can continue to answer those. And then I'm going to pass it over to Amy, and she's going to go through some other slides.
So I want to talk for a minute about how to teach the brain.
Thank you, Sheila. So today, one of the things that I wanted to share with you is the brain and the way that the brain can be explained to children. So this video is a really, really good one. I watched it years ago in a training, and I keep going back to it because it has a very simple message to it. And then this visual that we have here on the screen also shows the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain, and just kind of gives us an idea of what tasks are involved with each part of the brain. So Sheila, if you want to go ahead and play the video now.
For a minute about how to teach the brain. One of the really important things that we know in trauma is that when we help people understand the injury trauma creates in the brain and help them understand how that impacts the way they respond to other events in the world, it really helps them and their families move forward in their healing. So lots of people have given ways to teach the brain. As a practitioner myself, I've taken a lot of the models from Dr. Dan Siegel, taken models from the Hahn Foundation for teaching in the optimistic classroom, and looking at some of the things Ledoux has done, and put them together and really challenged myself and folks that I educate about practicing really teaching the brain. So when I explain this to teenagers, I start with the hand model, okay? And I start by explaining that we're going to talk about the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain that everyone has. Formally, this is called the limbic system, and this is called the cerebral cortex. But what we're going to talk is downstairs brain and upstairs brain. So in your downstairs brain, this is where fight, flight, or freeze lives, okay? When threat comes at you, your body has 3 reactions it can make. It can fight, it can run away, or it can stay very still until the danger's gone. That's what this brain does, okay? This part of the brain. What's up here, the upstairs brain, its job, among many other things, is to solve problems, to help you calm down, solve problems, okay? And to tell the downstairs brain, I got this. We're going to be okay. There's another solution. So what happens a lot of times to kids who've experienced trauma is if you think about these like muscles, because you've gone through a lot of threat, this downstairs part of the brain's been doing push-ups your whole life, okay? So this part of the brain's really strong. The part of your brain that solves problems hasn't had as much exercise because you've had to be really strong to be a survivor, a thriver. So what happens is that the brain gets what I call emotionally hijacked. This downstairs brain comes up on top of this brain, it takes over, okay? So the downstairs brain's in control. And so you fight, you run, you freeze. The only things that work when you're down here are things that calm you down. So they call them self-regulation skills. And that happens from connection. Somebody talking to you, helping you breathe, helping you feel your body calm down. Once that happens, then the upstairs brain can come back, and then you can solve problems. So that's how I try to explain to teenagers the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain, and what happens to them when they experience a threat. With young children, what I've found is they like animals. When I say young, probably 3 to 8 years old. Sometimes teenagers like it too. And so what we call this is the downstairs brain, that threat center again, is what I call the barking dog. If you think about when any noise or threat makes, usually a dog will bark. So this is the barking dog, okay? A problem solver is often called the wise owl. So upstairs is the wise owl, downstairs is the barking dog, okay? When the dog barks, the owl flies away. And so when the dog's barking, the only things they can do are maybe practice blowing bubbles, maybe practice breathing deeply, things that help the dog start calming down. And that's where you build their self-care strategies. They practice lots of different things to help the dog stop barking. The first skill being recognizing when their dog barks. Once they learn how to calm the barking dog, then the owl flies back, and then they can come up with solutions. And again, they're trying to get this muscle stronger. The problem for most people who are intervening, if you're talking to a family, most parents are going to naturally start with redirection and consequences for negative behavior. That's the first place they go. They're shaking fingers and telling somebody, stop that, you need to do this. That's an upstairs brain intervention, while most children who've experienced trauma are downstairs. So the term Siegel uses is you connect, then you redirect. The only thing that will calm a barking dog or the downstairs brain is helping that child calm down. And only then, once you teach the child to calm down, can you engage the part of the brain that solves problems and actually come up with solutions for better behavior choices. And that's why it's important to respond to the need, respond to the safety needs that get kicked up by threat, and not just react to the behavior that happens.
Thank you guys for watching that video. So the main takeaway from that, because I'm not assuming that, we're talking about stress today, we're not necessarily talking about trauma. But the important takeaway from that is, and this is something that I use in my everyday practice, is if a student is feeling very upset, very overwhelmed, maybe is crying or having, just, throwing a tantrum, whatever it might look like for that child, I want to be sure to give them some time to calm down on their own. Give them some space, because you can't come to them and say, okay, we need to do this and we need to do this and we need to fix this if they're in that space. So I think that that's a really good way to describe that for us, so that we can remember that. So we've got to give some space. And in a little while, we're going to talk about some ideas for calming down when students have stress. And one of those ways I was thinking is, if you could provide kind of a calm down space in your home. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that next. Okay. So next slide. All right. So signs of stress in children. Largely, you're going to see behavioral changes. You're going to see physical symptoms, fears. You guys can see the list here. A lot of times, if we'll start to notice things in the classroom, or parents will reach out and they'll say, wow, I'm really seeing this change in my child and they're having trouble paying attention and all these kinds of things. And that's when we can talk with the kiddos and be like, okay, what's going on, what's changed. It can be something as simple as like a new addition to the family, or a change in routine. And right now I find myself talking with kids a lot about like the holidays coming up, if they're used to celebrating them with family members that they might not get to see this time. And, just reminding them that this is a strange time and it won't always be this way, and that some good things can come out of it as well. But that we all need to stay safe and healthy. Difficulty concentrating can be another sign of stress in children for sure. Decreased or increased appetite. And there were some others listed on there as well. Okay, next slide. All right, so as you can see, the typical child social emotional development is listed here. So I'll give you a moment to look through that, depending on what age group your child falls in or your children fall in. Generally for 6 to 8 year olds, it's that, showing more independence from parents. Vocabulary is growing. They're starting to make connections between feelings and situations. And less focus on self and more concern for others is another one you start to see. Largely for 9 to 11 year olds. So if the 6 to 8 year olds, we're talking about, kindergarten through about 2nd or 3rd grade. And then we're talking about for the 9 to 11, about 3rd through 5th grade. Peer influences start to come in a lot more with that one, and peer pressures. More academic challenges, because things definitely do ramp up starting around 3rd grade. And ability to consider point of view of others. So those are the typical things. And hopefully as you're looking through that list, you're like, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that. Okay, we can go on to the next one, Sheila. Awesome. Okay. So strategies to cope, you guys can see, and hopefully you already use some of these things. I often like to ask students and children what helps them. What are some things that they do? I get a lot of YouTube videos lately in recent years. That's been a big thing. Their favorite YouTubers. We are doing a lot of things in the schools now with like the yoga, meditation, mindfulness practices. All of those other things that are listed there are excellent. I also came up with a few others. So talking about how stress makes their body feel, something I know talking is on there with a trusted adult or someone, but just kind of going through that, like, okay, where do you feel your stress? Where is it bothering you? And just so they can start to recognize when that's coming up, and then maybe do some strategies before it gets to a point where they're feeling overwhelmed. Journaling is another great thing. Along with like the artwork, depending on how old the student is. If they are someone that likes to write, I know that can be very helpful in getting their stress level down a little bit. Something interesting in the current situation that we're in, since we are spending so much time at home, I'm hearing from a lot of students, maybe WVA students or just, students who are in the hybrid setting, that they're doing some redecorating of their own space at home, or, reorganization or something like that, to try to help themselves and to feel more calm and to feel more settled, and kind of make it their own, since we are spending so much more time there. And then earlier I mentioned providing a calm down space, and whether that can be, if you have a basement and there's a space that they like to go in the basement, or if it's their room or something, providing that as kind of a calm down space, and maybe even providing like a visual breathing activity or mindfulness activity or something, so that that's there, and so that they know that's a safe place they can go to calm down by themselves. Since we are at home and we're together, and if you have a big family, it can be really hard to get that time alone. And it can be really hard for kids to be able to gauge their stress and use those stress scales if they're constantly around other people. It's important for the children to have some time alone as well. Next slide, please, Sheila. Awesome. Okay, so in the Westerville City School District, we use the PATHS curriculum in kindergarten through 5th grade. So PATHS stands for Promoting Alternative Thinking Strategies. And these pictures are just images of some of the lessons, some of the stuff that we use for our lessons. So these are specifically from 5th grade. You can see there's an example of a feeling scale. There's a list of 20 ways to calm down. And when we do this lesson, we always ask the students to also provide 2 other ones that they might use on their own. And students often are really happy and ready to talk about those kinds of things. And then the problem diary that's in the middle, describe a situation that has happened between you and other people that made you feel stressed. When we do this lesson, that's very important. Sometimes kids are like, oh, I don't feel stressed. Oh no, I'm not very stressed. But if you can really, tell them, let's really think about something. It could have been anything. It could have been this morning at home if there was some sort of conflict, or it could be, where you're feeling stressed because in your weeks in hybrid, when you are not at school, you're struggling with getting your work done or something like that. So even things as simple as that. And then they will more readily write things down. And then back to what I mentioned before is talking about the physical symptoms and physical reactions. And I say circle 2 or more, and sometimes kids will circle everything if they're really willing to have that conversation. And then again, more focus on what are some things that help you to relax, so that they can start to get that idea of, I do these things a lot. Is it because it helps me to calm down? So, okay, next slide, Sheila. So for right now, I think we're going to hold off on this one. This is a video and it's a little bit long. So it's like a progressive muscle relaxation video. And you're all going to get these slides. You will also have my contact information. I have some of this stuff on my Schoology page as well. So this is me talking through like what a lesson would look like in a classroom for a muscle relaxation activity. And so if we have time at the end, we'll show that, but it is a little bit lengthy. All right, and next I'm handing things over to Sheila.
Hi, Westerville City Schools families. Amy Van Sickle here. I'm the school counselor.
Sorry about that. I know it takes me a minute to unmute myself and then do the slide. But yeah, hopefully we can get to that, but we just want to make sure we answer your questions and kind of get through all of these other slides to get you guys what you need. So what can I do as a parent? I mean, that's why you signed up for this session. That's why you're here. And so there's a lot of different things, and you can read the list. But I think one of the most important things as I continue to get older and as I'm a parent, as well as working with students, is to really check myself first and to really kind of role model how I handle stress. And I'm always asking my students, like, how do you see someone you think is handling stress really well? What do you think they're doing? Even interviewing them, like I even sometimes say, what do you think your parents are doing to handle stress? Why don't you ask them about that? They might be doing it and you don't even know about that. Also really watching kind of how much during this time, how much information they're getting online or on TV, and with all the news with the current health crisis that we're dealing with, kind of monitoring that, because sometimes our bodies can only take so much, and that input is too much. So we really want to kind of figure out how to limit some of that. And I know for myself, there are times, and even for your kid, that they just need some quiet, some really like different, not a lot of sound, not a lot of things coming into their brain. They just need some quiet time. Really figuring out different situations, and as a family, maybe at dinner or when you're in the car, how are we handling these things? How have we figured out how to get through other things in the past? And how are we doing this together? And really making sure that they're aware that we're all in this together. We've figured out hard times before. This is what we can do to handle this stress or current situation, whatever that might be for your family in their lives. Really checking in with them about their friendships. And I know right now, when we're not at school every day, and for some students who are learning online, figuring out how to talk to their friends, maybe setting up something virtually that they can see their friends, or figuring out a way to call them or text them or kind of stay connected with that. Making sure we're eating healthy, making sure we're exercising. I know right now with all these leaves around us, something I know I love to do as a kid is jumping in leaf piles or raking leaves. I mean, as simple as that really helps us feel better. Making sure we play with our children, making sure we offer them reassurance to feel better, and also know that we are in this together. I think for me, as I watch students, I think if they know someone is in their corner and listening to them and going to be with them during this journey, it is amazing how much better they feel. And really understanding and recognizing those physical symptoms or sensations in our body. And that's an activity you can do where you can draw their face or an outline and kind of really asking them, how are you feeling in your stomach, or how's your head feeling, or where do you really notice in your body that you're experiencing stress? And they might not be able to label it. They might not be able to tell you why, and that's okay. Just being really present with how they're feeling in the moment. So we continue to talk about stress and ways to cope, but we also want to make sure we know that some stress can be really beneficial. If we never experienced any stress in our lives, we would never know how to cope with something as it comes our way. And really sitting in those feelings, knowing that we're not going to feel happy every second of the day. And that's okay. And for kids to be given permission that. I know I have a student who will always say, I'm supposed to be happy all the time. That's what they want me to be. And if I'm not happy, everyone's going to be upset. And it's we want you to experience all feelings. There's no way one person can be happy every second of the day. And really learning how to deal with those uncomfortable feelings like anger and sadness and confusion and anxiety. How do we cope with that? And having to deal with that really helps us go through those steps. Some activities you can do with your children. And a lot of time is really asking them, what are some things that you'd like to do? What are some things that when you're doing that, it makes you feel really good? I know Amy talked about some mindfulness stuff. Right now it's a little cold this morning, but as we've had really good weather, doing a mindful walk with them. I know sometimes with my students, I do a rainbow walk where they have to pick out different colors around them. And it really does help them focus and have fun with kind of being in that moment. There's so much going around us. Really practicing how to just be in the moment and enjoy that moment is really important. Doing some yoga and meditation. I know I've been trying in my groups to do more yoga stuff, and ask your students, what are some yoga poses that you've learned in school, or even seeing there's lots of really good resources online. And I even have students kind of make up different yoga poses. As long as they're doing deep breathing and enjoying themselves, they can kind of be silly with different animal poses or different things they like to do. Listen to music, dance as a family, really have fun with it as we spend more time indoors as the weather gets cold and harder to get outside, playing some music or making up some songs. And really one thing that I know always is helpful to me and I try to practice, and sometimes need a reminder, is really expressing that gratitude, thinking about things that that we can be thankful for and feel good about right now. And as difficult as things can be there, I bet your children can come up with lots of different things that they really enjoy and feel really good about. And, modeling that, maybe writing a note to a neighbor or to a family member you can't see, that you appreciate them and you're grateful for them. Next. So as we continue to talk about stress, we can't forget about what we're dealing with right now. And so how do we put all these strategies together to help our children manage stress during this time of COVID and the way our school looks? I know students, if they're coming into the building, they're faced with keeping 6 feet apart, wearing masks. How do we look at that and how do we help our students? And really recognizing how they're feeling and what's going on with them. I know, at least what I've seen with students, at least in elementary time, there are a lot of kids that were super excited to come back to school. There were some kids that were really anxious and nervous about all the things they had to do. So really kind of meeting them where they are in terms of how they're feeling at the moment. And everyone's going to look different. So just some important things to remember as we look at this. Remind your children that we are all in this together, that they have a support system, and maybe review with them. Who do you feel really good about at school? Or who do you feel really good about like at home or in the community, that that they are there with you and you can always contact them? As I said before, limit and monitor our social media. It's amazing how much is on TV like constantly. And I know, especially with COVID and with all the other things that are happening in the world, even when your child walks through the room and it's on, it's amazing what they pick up from you. I know I have older kids in high school, but I know when they were younger too, like I would say something and not even think they were listening, but they were listening, and it kind of comes out in different ways. So really watch that. Doesn't mean that you can't talk about it. It's just making sure that you're keeping your explanations like age appropriate. And if they ask a question, to answer it. I know a really good rule of thumb is to give them information to keep them safe, and make sure they know, but really letting them take the lead. If they ask a question, then answer it appropriately and honestly. And then review practical ways that they can be in control. I know that sometimes students and kids feel like they're so out of control and they have no way to kind of gain that control back or figure out how to manage things, but really remind them of that, like wearing a mask, washing your hands, different things that they can do to make them like kind of, unfortunately, it's weird to say that to normalize it, but we are right now, we've gone several months dealing with this pandemic and it's not going away. So really saying, this is where we are right now. Here's how we can do what we can do to manage that. And then it's always important, I know we've talked a lot about generalizing stress and how stress is everywhere and kids experience it, but when should you be concerned and when should you ask for help? So really, your kids, your students and your children, really figuring out if you notice something that's really different in them and they're not kind of being themselves, feeling really, we all have reasons to feel overwhelmed right now, but when it's like even more extreme than you've seen, when there's an unexpected change in their behavior, either at school or home. We've been, as we go along and things have been going okay, and then all of a sudden you see something very different, but you can't really figure out what has changed, really watching for that unexpected change. And I know often as kids came back into the buildings at the end of September, some were a little apprehensive, even though they love school. I mean, that's something that we kind of expected. But if you notice that they're kind of going around and they're really adamant about not wanting to go anywhere, not wanting to go outside, not wanting to go to school, really watch for that. And if your child is kind of making comments about wanting to hurt or kill themselves, really watching for those signs. And it's okay to ask that question. It's okay to be direct in an age-appropriate way if they're feeling really bad or not feeling like themselves, and you can ask that question. And also if they're kind of having lots of outbursts or really kind of maybe being with friends that they're not typically with or doing some things that's kind of out of character, some of those at-risk behaviors. And I'm going to pass it over to Amy.
Thank you, Sheila. That was all awesome information. So, when should I ask for help? And then the question is, who should I ask for help? So review your support system. Maybe you've got some people in your life who you can talk to about it, and maybe it can normalize some of it for you guys, because there's a spectrum. I mean, some children, and your children best, some children are high stress kiddos and some aren't at all, and things might flip and switch and all of that as they are growing. So review your support system. But talking to a pediatrician or healthcare provider can be very helpful as well. They often have a lot of resources and can make recommendations for you. And then check with your school counselor or school social worker about outside counseling resources. So I will say, like, as a school counselor, we want to help, and we are doing so many things all the time. We're providing like instruction in the classrooms to get the big ideas across to the kiddos about like calming down and problem solving and all those types of things. And providing them with ways to calm down. We cannot do, the clinical type counseling in the school because our jobs pull us in so many directions. But we do have fantastic resources and have had a lot of success with referring families for outside counseling resources. So please do not hesitate. If you don't know your school counselor's phone number, you can call the front office. There is one that represents, at least one that represents every building in the district. So you can absolutely connect with them, and they will do their best to help you as like the liaison between, getting that support and the school. Okay. And then always, yes, the student well-being page for our district is really great as well. There's a wealth of information on there too. And then also your school counselors, school social workers will probably have like Schoology pages, virtual classrooms, those kinds of things that you can access so that you can find resources if it's just something, it's just a rough day and you need something to calm down, like a, yoga practice or meditation or something like that. All right, next slide. And here we are, contact information. So there's Sheila's contact information first, then mine, and then Jen Verdina's information if you want to reach out to us. Again, you're going to get all these slides. Okay, and I think that's where we finish things off. I do believe that Jen Verdina is going to chime in here shortly just to say our goodbyes and see if there are any additional questions.